Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Miftahul Ghanniyah. So in this occasion, I would like to explain my understanding of the second reading materials about errors analysis and interlanguage. So error analysis. There are some good reasons for focusing on errors. The first one is because errors are obvious or easy to spot feature in learner language. It is also useful for teacher to know what errors that the learner makes, and also making error, it actually helps learners to learn when they self-correct the error they make. So there are four steps in analyzing the errors. So the first one is identifying errors. It is important to us to know which one the errors. We have to distinguish between errors and mistakes. So errors occur when someone has a lack of knowledge. For example, like when she or he keep using constantly using contain instead of contained in the place of past tense form. So we call this an error. But if sometimes she or he use contain, but sometimes he use contained, we call it a mistake, because she or he actually has knowledge about the correct forms, but it's just like they unable to perform it. So the next steps is identifying the errors. Describing the errors. So describing the errors, after we identify the errors, now we can describe and classify them into types. So there are several ways to do this. So the first one is to classify them into grammatical categories. So we could gather all of the errors relating to the verbs, and then we identify different kinds of verbs errors and verbs errors. For the example, like the previous example that I gave, when someone keep using contain instead of contained, we can classify this as errors in past tense. So also we can, the second ways is like to try to general ways in which the learner's utterances differ from the reconstructed the target language utterances, such as omission, misinformation, or misordering. So omission is where when they keep leaving out an item such as article, and misinformation is like when they keep using the grammatical form in another place of grammatical form. And also misordering is when they keep putting the word in the wrong order. So the next steps is explaining the errors. So after we identified, describe, and classify the errors, now we have to explain why they occur, why the errors occurs. So errors are systematic, predictable, and universal. So they have different sources, such as learners' errors of omissions, and overgeneralizations errors, or transfer errors. Yeah, that's the kinds of errors. And then the next one, the last steps is to evaluate errors. So evaluate errors. So evaluate errors is actually a way to understand and correct the errors we make. So some errors known as a global errors, where this is the big one that mess up the whole sentence, so they can make it hard to understand the sentence. And then another errors is what we call it? The local errors. So this is the smaller one that only that affect only one part of the sentence, so it might not as much confusion as the global errors. So those are the 4 steps in analyzing the errors. So the next one is interlanguage. So interlanguage is when people learn a new language, they create a mental system, and we call this interlanguage. There are 2 main theories about this. So behaviorist theory and mentalist theory. So behaviorist theory is says that learning a new language is like forming habits. So when people see and hear something, they react to it. They remember when they get it right. So for the example, they remember the response when they get it right. So for the example, like when someone say give me a pencil, and if you give them a pencil, so this is a correct response. So behaviorist theory is when we focusing. So behaviorist theory is focuses on what we see and what we can see, and ignores what happened in the learner's minds. So the second theories is mentalist theories. So the mentalist theories based on how we learn our first language. So it says that this theory says that only humans can learn languages. So it says that there's something in our minds called language acquisition device for this. So this theory is basically said that we have a built-in ability to learn a language. So input is needed. Input is like what we can see and what we can hear. If we call it input, is needed, but it's only to triggers the language device. That's what it says in this theory. So the next one is, let me explain again about the interlanguage. So interlanguage is actually a term coined by the linguist Carrie Salinker. So it means that when we learn a new language, we build our own language systems. So it's not exactly like how we learn our first language or the target language that we're trying to learn. It's just unique. So the last one is how does learning happen? So learning a language is like a computer process, a computer system, where learners take in the information from their environment, and then process it in their mind, and then take some of it as a language knowledge. So this all happen in our minds, and we make and build our own unique interlanguage. So and finally this this language knowledge, like we use this language knowledge to speak and to write in a new language. So yeah, that's all about the interlanguage. So, and also that's all for me from for this videos. Thank you all for watching, and assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.